Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So, I have sort of an introspective video for you guys today. I was thinking recently about how my book tastes have or have not changed over time. I don't know, I guess I've been thinking about books that I would not have read unless I'd been on BookTube, which I will have for you guys. I'll have that video for you guys eventually, but in thinking about that, it also kind of just made me think how, in the last 10 years, let's say, how has my reading taste changed? Has it changed that much? Am I reading kind of the same types of things or whatever? And I guess I realized that, my reading taste has changed a good amount, I think, in that time. Mostly because I think that my taste has broadened a lot, and I've always been someone who would read pretty much anything, given the opportunity to read, even if it wasn't something that I super loved, I still really enjoy reading, so I would still read. But I think that I definitely have expanded quite a bit what I pick up, kind of my go-to genres and the go-to types of things that I like to read. So I just thought I would chat a little bit about that with you guys. So kind of thinking this through, there's really two big things that have very much impacted what I read in terms of how my life has changed in the last 10 years. So the first is becoming a full-time working adult. And what I mean by that is that so when you're in school, you are very, very busy. I'm not saying that people who are in school have it easy or anything like that. I've been there. I also went to grad school, so I remember what that kind of schedule is like. But when you're in school, especially university level, you are the master of your own time in a way that you are just not when you're a full-time working adult. You have some flexibility that you just don't have as a full-time adult in general, full-time working adult, because I have to be at work every morning at 8 o'clock, whether or not I feel like doing work that day or not. I don't have the option to skip a meeting the way that if I really wanted to, I could just skip a class. I don't have the option to move things around and decide hey, I'm gonna work from here today. Now some people do, and actually I've realized in my current job that is something I really value, is having some level of flexibility in terms of where and when I do my work, because I work in IT, and that is often an option to have some level of control over that. And I don't have that right now, and I would like to have that again. So I'm not saying that never happens, but all that to say, when I became a full-time working adult, the energy that I had at the end of the day to read was just so much less. So previous to that, I was somebody who was a very snobby reader in a lot of ways. I did not read a lot of commercial fiction, a little bit here and there, mostly in the form of mysteries, but I wasn't super gung-ho about that. I was very much into reading literary fiction. I was very into being well-read and having read important things. And when somebody asked me what I was reading, I liked being able to say oh, right now I'm reading The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark, and I'm really getting a lot out of it and reflecting on this, that. That was me. I was kind of terrible that way. Or whatever was up for the Man Booker. That was really what I was into reading. Man, I was kind of insufferable. Anyway, that was a huge part of my fiction reading, and I cared that people thought what I was reading was important. So once I became a full-time worker, I just didn't have the energy at the end of the day to really dive into that stuff in the way that I used to. And I think also just as I've aged and become more confident basically, and don't care what people think about my reading choices in the same way. I don't judge other people for their reading choices, and therefore don't judge myself for my reading choices as much. I think I've just grown up and gotten more confident. I don't care about that as much. So I still enjoy literary fiction, don't get me wrong. My favorite book that I've read this year so far is literary fiction, which was Aidi by Roxane Gay, if you've not heard me gushing about that yet. So it's not anything against literary fiction. I just think that at the time I was very focused on having read a lot of the classics and being very up on the literary prizes and reading important books. And I just don't care about that in the same way. But what I do have a lot of energy for at the end of the day is more commercial fiction. So I have become somebody who reads a lot more mysteries and romance and suspense and whatever. That is something that I can wrap my head around at the end of the day. I'm not someone who, I also watch a lot less TV than I used to. So like commercial fiction really for me has taken over the place that TV used to, which is kind of funny because actually right now is the golden age of television content. But I have a hard time focusing on TV a lot of the time unless it's something just like super engaging and really sucking me in. So yeah, like a lot of the time I would be spending watching movies or watching TV, I now spend reading commercial fiction. So I think that is a big change in kind of my general media consumption, but specifically with books. And I think along the lines of like being less snobby, I think I'm a lot less suspicious of YA than I used to be. And honestly, a lot of that has been watching BookTube. So I had an interesting discussion on Voxer with Leanna from Leanna's library about this, but like, what is really the function of YA at this point, and like, why does it exist, and like, whatever. So I think when I was in my early 20s, YA was really taking off kind of in the wake of the success of Twilight, and Twilight and then the Hunger Games, like, so there was like this wave of like paranormal romance YA, and then there's this wave of dystopian YA. And so much of it, in my opinion, was not good quality, and it was being sold. Basically, I, at the time, was going through my reckoning of the fact that YA is not actually really for young adults in a lot of ways. Like nowadays, it really is kind of like a certain set of tropes that are teenage appropriate in theory, but are read not just by teenagers, but are read by like adults as well. And I think that I was feeling like I was just up in my feelings about that. Like I was like, what if you're gonna write if you're gonna call it young adult, it should be written for teens, and like if you're writing for teens, you should be doing this, and like, you should be pushing them to think about this, and it shouldn't be such a like morally like black and white universe. Like there was a lot of things that I was just sort of like frustrated about. I've subsequently just sort of like made my peace with that, and I now think of YA not really as being for teenagers, but as being a collection of tropes that is essentially a marketing device. And since doing that, I've become less suspicious of it. And I think by watching a lot of BookTube, I've found readers of YA whose recommendations I really trust. And so I think I get the enjoyment of reading YA that I'm actually going to connect with, as opposed to being more hit and miss. And I also just think that YA has really gotten out of this rut that it was in of like, a certain kind of book was the only YA published, it felt like, and that's not actually true, but it just was like, right now, we're pushing our dystopian YAs. I don't know that there is like one genre of YA that is like, this is the only thing that's being pushed. Like, it feels like there's a lot more like kind of range in terms of like front list push. So I think I also just appreciate that, and because of that, there's like, yeah, I've gotten to read some things that I don't think I would have picked up even 5 years ago, because I was still sort of butthurt about being a little suspicious of that genre. But now that I have like trusted guides who specifically walk me through YA fantasy, because there's a lot of YA fantasy that I end up enjoying. So I'm thankful to people who like kind of do the hard work and give me good recommendations so that I can enjoy that. And recently I've been really getting into YA mysteries, and like that's a fun new kind of subgenre of mystery for me to explore and enjoy. So yeah, that's definitely something that's changed over time. Okay, so that was all things that I think changed when I became like just older and more confident in my reading, / like had a different kind of time demand on my schedule in terms of how much brain power I had at the end of the day. So that was one thing. The other thing that really I think changed how I read a lot is grad school. So I got my master's in essentially religion and art. Like that was the focus of my degree. And I did that because I went through a real like crisis of faith post college, and like was having a real hard time reconciling things that I had been taught were like absolutely true, and realizing like my own experience contradicts this. So I went to grad school to like read novels and figure out what was going on. And from that, several things changed about my reading. So first of all, when I was younger, I grew up fundamentalist, which is weird because neither of my parents are fundamentalists, but I went to a fundamentalist school. Anyway, we could do a whole video on that, but I'm not going to do that now. So I grew up with a very specific set of like, this is true, and if you don't believe this, you're not in the club. Like, very specific. And in grad school, I did some reading and research on this. A huge piece of evangelical and fundamentalist culture is the reading culture. Like, it's very important. So, like, I read a lot of classics and literary fiction, and then I read a lot of religious nonfiction. So that was a huge, huge part of my reading diet. And post grad school, several things have changed. One, I did enough more scholarly religious nonfiction reading that most of what is popular, like what is published and is popular for the Christian market, I just can't deal with. Like, I really don't read that at all anymore, because I'm like, you're not explaining your logic here. This is not a good interpretation. This is bad exegesis of this passage. You clearly don't understand the Greek here. Like, I can't do that anymore. I'm also just not interested in it. I think I kind of got my fill, at least for a few years, while I was in grad school. And I also think it shaped what I enjoy reading from a religious standpoint to be much more about philosophy and much less about, like, dogma, if that makes sense. So, like, I'm trying to think of a book that when I get some time, I want to sit down and really dive into it. I really would like to read Truth and Method by Gadamer. That is something that I really want to have read, because, like, it's an important text in a number of different, like, postmodern theologians' thought. I want to read Jesus the Liberator by John Sobrino, because that's a very important liberation theologian from Latin America. So, like, I'm much more interested in, like, histories of religion. I'm interested in non-dominant culture theologians and postmodern theologians, and I'm interested in, like, philosophy. So, like, in that area, that's more what I'm interested in. And then in terms of just more broadly, like, I just read a lot more variety in nonfiction. So it used to be that a lot of my nonfictional time was devoted to very specific types of religious texts. And now, when I'm in the mood for something nonfiction, I very well may grab Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan, or We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Like, because I have more, like, mental space for nonfiction, I just get to read a lot more variety of it. And I also really have discovered how much I enjoy audiobooks for nonfiction, like, because it reads almost like a podcast, and so that is also something I really enjoy. So yeah, I think that grad school definitely very much changed a lot of my reading taste. I also, in grad school, did my, like, capstone thesis, whatever, project on romance novels and religion, like, specifically looking at, like, I called it Christian smut, but, like, the have you ever seen these books in the bookstore, the Christian romance novels? They are, like, a thing. So anyway, my project was about, like, Christian romance. Why is this a thing? So because of that, I read, I think, like, 400 or 500 romance novels in the space of, like, 18 months. And I had never really read a whole lot of romance before then. Like, I'd read some in high school, some Christian romances, because we were allowed to read those, because that is proper reading for young Christian girls to, you know, set their hearts on their true purpose in life, which is to get married. Anyway, sorry, no bitterness here at all, right? Anyway, so I'd read a few of those previously, but really I hadn't read hardly any romance, and, like, oh boy, have I read romance now. So grad school, not only, it's interesting, grad school expanded my horizons in terms of, like, reading, like, hard, like, really good and deep and meaty philosophy, which I think I was intimidated by before, but now it's like, oh, well, I've read Foucault, and that was, like, doable. I got through that without a problem. So I did that, and then I'm also like, oh, give me some 99-cent smut. I like that too. So thank you, grad school, for broadening my horizons both to the high and to the low brow. So yeah, anyway, those are just some thoughts about how my reading tastes have changed, like, in the last 10 years or so. I think the big theme is that I just have a lot more room in my reading taste for a lot of different types of voices and a lot of different types of books. And I think because, like I said earlier, I judge other people on their reading taste so much less than I used to. I used to be so judgy about that, of, like, this is what it means to be a reader. Like, I don't, like, if you read, you are a reader. And because that's my mentality now, I think I have given myself permission to enjoy a lot of other things. And as I was saying, I think just some of my, like, personal beliefs and, like, point of view on the world and things that I want to learn about now that I'm allowed to learn about them, like, I want to learn about them. So I think because of that, that also has broadened my taste. So anyway, those are just some thoughts on how my reading taste has changed in the last 10 years. I would love to hear from you guys if you have any thoughts on how your reading tastes have changed in the last 5 or 10 years. Like, do you feel like you kind of have grown in any way, or do you have, like, your steady, like, standbys that you always go back to? Yeah, let me know in the comments below. So yeah, I think that will do it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that will do it. I hope you guys are having a really great day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.